And welcome to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman here, your host and purveyor here at Whiskey Politics. You can find me at davesussman.com and all of our social media, which you've got listed here below: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, Instagrams. You can find me on Twitter, and of course at the Ricochet Network as well. So interesting how the times that we're watching happening around us right now actually impact the show. Originally had two guests slated for today. Our first guest was going to be Pete Hegseth. You know Pete from Fox and Friends Morning Edition, and he was going to be joining us this afternoon, but we got notification last night that he was recalled back to the National Guard. So wherever you may be right now, Pete, thoughts and prayers are with you, helping the country try to subdue those powers that are trying to destroy our American cities. So we will have extra time today to spend with our guest, Stacey Lennox. You know Stacey on Twitter. She's Scott's Fire, a fantastic writer over at PJ Media and other publications as well. We're going to kind of pull everything apart and put it back together, what we've been seeing happening to our great country over the past several days, and what it all means for our future as a country, what it means for the election, what it means for the left and for the right, and really, you know, is this a turning point, or is this just going to go away after a few days and people just get back to normal again? I don't know, but I do know this, and this is something I'm going to talk with Stacey about. What happened to George Floyd is we're not divided as a country on this. I think everybody is horrified that this could take place in an American city where this man was just essentially murdered. And we saw the tape for 8-9 minutes. So there's no division on this. So the idea that anybody that's coming out and suggesting that, you know what, I've got a major problem with the left, Antifa, whoever it may be, tearing down and destroying our American cities, in some way doesn't understand the anger that precipitated this, is just dead wrong, and they're using that for politics. But let's take a look at this for a minute. We've just had 3 months of people locked down. Many people are not comfortable when it comes to their homes. There may be several people living in a very small place, an apartment. Maybe they don't have all the food that they want or the entertainment that they want. Maybe they're no longer employed and they've got no money coming in. Maybe their health is deteriorating due to the stress and everything else that we've seen for the past 3 months. Essentially, what America and much of the world has become is a tinderbox. And you only need one incident, any incident, like what we just had, that just took place in Minnesota, where you have a fuse that is lit. And when that fuse is lit, who are the forces, the organizational structure that immediately went into play? I mean, for example, there were pallets of bricks that were purchased and distributed around the country in dozens of cities, placed strategically in areas where rioters would be able to use those bricks to break down windows of stores. Who placed those bricks? Where do they come from? Who paid for them? Who funds the organizational structure to allow for this? These are the questions that, as I'm taking a look at our television over the past several days, as you have, I'm sure, and disgusted by what you're seeing, these are the questions that need to be answered. I've got zero problem, and I know most viewers watching this have zero problem with peaceful protesters. Whether you agree with them or not, it's their First Amendment right. You go and peacefully protest, clean up your trash, and go home and then go to work the next day. Okay? But the rioters that are absolutely devastating American cities all across the country, and not just urban cities, but in the suburbs, have essentially taken a page from Rodney King and decided that they were going to implement it in a much different, more effective way. And we're seeing graffiti all over war monuments in Washington, D.C. We're seeing stores burned down. We're seeing independent business owners who were just coming out of 3 months of COVID-19 forced lockdown, now essentially coming back to destroyed stores. My question is, who benefits from a continued economic devastation through the summer into an election cycle? I think it's a legitimate question. You don't need to be tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist here on any of this. And in fact, if you take a look at your history and study where much of this organizational approach comes from, where it stems from, you only need to take a look at Cloward Piven strategy. And I'm going to talk about this with Stacey here in a few moments. We know who Cloward and Piven were. They were sociology professors, socialists, who decided that they were going to create a paper that apparently carried a tremendous amount of weight with the hard left. And a lot of people suggest that the hard left used this ideology to create chaos and crises. What is their strategy? Well, to keep it concise, it's essentially to overwhelm the system so badly that it completely collapses so it could be rebuilt with the mindset to create a new socialist utopia with universal living wage across the board. You have to ask yourself, is that so far-fetched with the people like AOC out there today purporting, and we saw with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi with her CARES Act that came out last week, or the Heart Bill, or whatever this thing was that she put out. It was basically a socialist grab bag. This is what they're trying to do. So the question is who is organizing what we're seeing happening right now with the burning down of incredible American cities all across the country? Every major city has taken, and the suburbs as well. Who are the people that are organizing this? And these are the questions that need to be answered over the next coming weeks, because it is those people. It is the leaders of the hard left, the behind-the-scenes people, and I'm going to talk about this today with Stacey, who's got some insight into who these people really are, that are pulling the puppet strings, using the crisis as Rahm Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago, but before that he was chief of staff with President Obama. His famous quote is, "Never let a crisis go to waste." And we saw exactly how the left have responded this week. You cannot question the peaceful protests that are happening right now because of the horrific murder of George Floyd. I get that. But every single news program interspersed between every single picture of the riots are news reporters and anchors sitting in their comfortable studios suggesting, but this is nothing to do with the peaceful protests. They are using the peaceful protests to cover them. And this is how we're seeing so much devastation. Well, who is pulling the puppet strings? And that's what we're going to be talking about today with Stacey Lennox. So sit back, pour yourself your favorite drink, enjoy the Whiskey Politics interview with Scott's Fry, Stacey Lennox. Stacey Lennox is a writer at PJ Media. She is also over at NOQ Report. Going to ask about that. She's the co-host of The Loftus Party. Yes, our good friend Michael Loftus, who we've had on the show, which is a podcast. And you can also find Stacey at KL. What is that? I am so blind. KLRN Radio. Yes. And you can also find her on Twitter, where she has a very, very active account, Scott's Fire. We'll have the link up here under your name. Tell us, first of all, welcome, Stacey. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. I've been following you on Twitter for some time, and you've always got some great content, and I love your articles up at PJ Media. I want to talk about your latest here in just a moment, but tell us a little bit about the naming of your Twitter account. Where does that come from, Scott's Fire?
Well, I'm naturally a little Irish, and my husband is Scottish.
Okay.
So I'm a little difficult to handle. And I'm his, so.
You got it. Okay, nothing to do with the fire event that took place, that island situation?
No,
fire festival?
Not at all. No,
okay.
Never.
You say that you are a recovering Fortune 500 executive and a healthcare professional, and one day in 2015, you were hit by a truck, literally, and that changed everything. Talk about that for a minute.
Sure. Basically, for the first 5 years of my grown-up career, I worked as a registered nurse in and around New York State. I did everything from intensive care at home, so actually people on ventilators and complex treatments at home, to hospice. Okay. I went back to school with every intention of becoming a healthcare administrator. Got derailed, ended up with a master's in industrial and labor relation from Cornell University, and ended up working as a director of human resources. So when we get into things like employment law and stuff like that, I tend to weigh in heavily on those because that's what I did for about 15 years.
Yeah, yeah, and you do talk a lot about business, and I'm kind of similar to you in that way. You know, outside of obviously talking about these issues on the show, I'm a small business advocate myself. What are you seeing happening right now? This is kind of a survey, I guess, landscape issue for you. What are you seeing happening right now with industry, with commerce, with business, and the economy generally?
Well, I will say what I see, at least in my area. Uh, I live in Georgia, so
Okay,
if we had the nation's first governor say we're opening this popsicle stand.
Kemp.
Um, so a lot of the small businesses around here seem to be recovering. Our local restaurants are opening back up. I think because of where I live, it's such a community-oriented kind of place that we try to take really good care
Hmm.
of our small business owners while everything was shut down. Um, as far as the economy overall, I'm seeing some good indicators. I think that prior to the riots, there was a lot of upside. I think a lot of the progress we were seeing may be questionable now. I mean, when you look at some of the damage, I can't even imagine the hits that are going to be taken to the insurance industry. Um, you know, large retailers, I mean, you're talking Targets, I think in 12 cities just closed down because they were being targeted.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and I mean, high-end retailers, I mean, this whole thing has just, I think, I think the outcomes of this on top of the pandemic shutdown bring a whole new dimension to it that I'm not even sure we can contemplate yet.
Everybody's been so focused locally on their. I mean, I haven't watched more local news in the last 2 days than I have since the last major earthquake in Southern California. So I think
Right.
everybody's kind of focused on their local cities right now. What's been happening in Atlanta regarding the riots?
Well, I think the mayor of Atlanta, I'm well north of Atlanta, so I'm very happy about that right now.
Okay.
My community has been spared, but I think the mayor of Atlanta came out the night after the initial really bad riots and looting and things like that. And I think she made one of the more realistic and powerful statements, Keisha Lance Bottoms. I
Yes.
think she and Governor Kemp worked very well together. She had no objection to bringing the National Guard in um, and that sort of thing. I'm not sure I agree with her decision to fire two officers who were enforcing curfew and getting people out of cars and trying to identify who they were. Um, I guess they found that was a little rough,
Mm.
but you're either going to have a curfew or you're not, is kind of my perspective. Small businesses in the downtown area were definitely tragically hit. I think a lot of people heard the rapper Killer Mike talk about business owners that he knew within the Black community who have owned businesses for years and walk in and they're essentially ruined. I did see on our local news a lot of cooperative cleanup, a lot of people coming out and supporting the people whose businesses were hurt. This did also extend to Buckhead, which I think kind of goes to Buckhead, for those of you who don't know, is a much wealthier area. It has a lot more high-end
It's
shops,
beautiful.
high-end
Yeah, I've been there
restaurants,
many times.
etc. hmm And I think, um, consistent with Antifa, who I'm
Antifa.
sorry, I see you. I've been following Andy No for a while. I've been following
Yes.
what's going on in Portland. He's been warning for a while that this was going to happen, and it did. We did see a lot of damage in Buckhead, and a lot of those ended up being home invasions. So my
Really?
friend,
Home
yeah,
invasions in Buckhead. So for outside of Atlanta, it's kind of the Beverly Hills of Atlanta. It's a beautiful
right.
new stores, high end luxury, and very
Lots
expensive
of
homes.
old, gorgeous houses. I mean,
Yeah. So there
yeah.
was home invasions in Buckhead.
hmm
Were Second Amendment remedies taken by homeowners? No.
Buckhead is Atlanta. Atlanta and Savannah are very big liberal areas.
Yeah.
Um,
As most big
Buckhead,
cities
people
are.
that live in Buckhead have a lot of them have attachment to the entertainment industry. Kind of like in Nashville, there's a big contingent of entertainment industry folks up there now.
Okay.
Um, so the politics are a little different. If you went 20 miles north to Kennesaw, almost everybody owns a gun. So yeah, it's just different. But a local friend of mine who's a realtor, he's been contacted by no fewer than 4 people who said, put my house on the market. I'm never going back because such horrific things happened when the home invasions took place. Not to their homes, to the people.
So were people like they were assaulted, or was it just theft? What were some of the reports?
The one that he articulated to me, because it was somebody he knew, was that the family was held at gunpoint. The child, their 6-year-old child was there, and the people who invaded the home forced the mother to strip while they filmed her.
You're kidding me.
No, there was a lot of. I mean, they were concerned, obviously, at the time that she was going to be assaulted, and literally stole everything in the house, stole their cars. Like, you won't see this reported on the news because it's Buckhead.
I was going to ask you, why isn't this not in the news?
Because it's not going to be in the news. This person is relatively wealthy. He basically called his friend who's a real estate agent and said, come get me. The cops are dropping us off in Cobb County, at this hotel. Come get me in the morning, put my house on the market, and I'm moving up by you.
That's horrifying.
Oh, I totally agree.
I mean, and they didn't have guns. They just don't believe in defending themselves? They don't believe in having guns in the home? What was...
Like I said, Buckhead's a funny place. Atlanta's a very liberal city. I mean, you're talking about a city that is the home base of Stacey Abrams, who is a radical gun control advocate. That doesn't reflect the rest of the state at all. But
holy cow! I mean, this is incredible, and the fact that this is the first time I'm hearing about it. I mean, it just goes to show that the media has been so selective over everything that people get to hear now, as long as it goes along with their narrative, peaceful protesters and the like. I got to ask you. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I was just joking with my son. And, because he's 20. And so, what they say about if you're under 30 and not a liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're not over, conservative over 40, you don't have a brain type thing. We're going back and forth about all of this. And I'm trying to get him to understand that there's a much bigger picture to all of this. Cloward Piven, right? Richard Cloward and Francis Piven, and the theory that they put together in the 1960s that you overwhelm a system so it completely crashes, it collapses, and it has to be rebuilt in the mindset that these socialists have. Universal basic income and everything else along those lines. If we're taking a look at the last 3 to 4 months of an election year, which is probably going to be as, I don't know, probably as combative as we saw since 1968, the last time we had massive riots in an election year like this. Do you think that this has been by design, that as companies, as businesses were starting to reopen, Stacey, in the last couple of weeks, that we had this trigger incident, and obviously it's a horrific incident, but any incident like this could have triggered a powder keg of people being locked in their homes for 3 months. Do you think this was by design?
I think when, number one, not paying attention to what's been going on in the Pacific Northwest with this anarcho-communist, militant group made up of a lot of well-educated, college-educated radicals made in Bill Ayers and Bernadette's image, not tracking them with the same vigor that they were tracking the KKK back in the day, will be one of the largest intelligence failures in our country's history. They were more interested in pursuing a 3-star general for a phone call that was an absolute nothing burger to take him out than they were actually looking at true risks. And I think when they actually do the research and somebody actually writes a history of this, you're going to find out that this came straight out of the university system where Bill Ayers and his cohorts went to teach when they got out of jail.
You're talking about Bill Ayers, Weather Underground, supporter of President Obama back in the day. Bernadette, what's her name? Dorn?
Is it Dorn? I think so.
Yeah. So you're kind of I guess, suggesting that what I'm suggesting, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist guy. 9/11 was not an inside job. The earth is round. Okay. We landed on the
Yeah,
moon.
no, totally.
Right.
That was us. We're in space now. That wasn't
Right.
a joke.
Right. So, before people turn us off and say they're just a bunch of right-wing wacko conspiracy theorists, I'm just taking a look at this cataclysmic event that we've had in the past 3 months, which is the global pandemic lockdown, which I believe is going to be looked back on and hit by history as probably the world's worst mistake ever. The CDC just last week quietly released updated statistics of the actual death rate. It went from 3.5% down to 0.26%. And where in the media did we hear about that? Yet at the same time, people are freaked out. And so, this is, and so when you have this, and all of a sudden, I guess it's okay to protest peacefully, but you couldn't go into a retail store and buy a shirt last week. But this week, you can stand amongst 1,000 of your closest left-wing friends.
Oh yeah, the lockdowns are over.
Yeah,
like if your mayor comes back and tries to lock businesses down, good luck with that.
And what happens in I tweeted this a few days ago. What happens in a couple of weeks from now when you don't have massive spikes amongst all of those people that came out and protested?
Well, you're already seeing that in Italy. Italy says their cases are down to nothing, and the ones that are popping up are far less deadly and virulent. This is typical of a lot of viruses. When they come out, they're horrific, and then they mutate and get less deadly, less virulent. So Italy said it. The UK has come out and said that the company there that's working on the vaccine may not have enough people contract COVID-19 to determine whether or not the vaccine actually works. We took, I'm not going to get too critical, shall we say? Okay. If you look back at our history of pandemics, whether it's the guy from the UK, I forget his name right now, Neil Ferguson, I think, the one who did the Imperial College model, or Dr. Fauci.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember the HIV pandemic. Okay.
I was just talking about that this morning with my son.
They got it all wrong then too.
If
when you're dealing with something
if in 1984, I was in high school at the time. If in 1984, I think it was around 84 when it came out, you can get it from kissing somebody. You may be able to get it from. They were talking about closing down our prom. I mean, not to age myself here, but that was what was being bantered about because it's science, and you got to trust the science.
I graduated in '89. It was the same thing. Coming of age then, was horrible.
Yeah,
and they took the same kind of panic around something they didn't understand. And what we have to understand is the experts aren't expert in anything when we're dealing with a virus that's 2 months old.
Yes.
And if you look at what we know about the virus now, that you're more likely to catch it because you're in close contact in confined quarters. The Chinese made the biggest mistakes in the world locking people in their homes with their families. They made people sicker. They probably had more deaths than they needed to, even in Wuhan.
Yeah, that's why Italy blew up, because of the intergenerational living situations there, especially in northern Italy.
I mean, what did Cuomo said? 66% of his patients came from home. 18% came from nursing homes.
Yeah.
And this is a month and a half after lockdown. Now, I was in radical opposition to lockdown from day one. I'm young enough and healthy enough. My family, I live with 2 essential employees. I wasn't not exposed to anything for any period of time that made any sense. One of my children is a teacher. She's now telling me that 1 in 5 teachers in her district is not coming back in the fall. That's the level of
20%.
panic the media has created.
Yeah, because people are afraid. People are afraid. Listen, it's impacted my personal relationships. There's friends of mine, there's people in my life that refuse to come out. Now, I'm trying to have discussions with them to get them to understand. But the fact is that when you're sitting at home for 3 months and you're doing nothing other than watching TV, and most of it is news, you're basically being conditioned. And this goes back to my initial discussion with you. Is our media, our politicians, are the scientists Are they marionettes? Are they puppets for a much deeper, darker organization with the power that is back, to back all of this? And what do you, again, not being a conspiracy tinfoil hatter guy, I'm just taking a look at what's happening. What do you think their intention is? What is their motivation here, if that is in fact happening?
Well, I think there is some concern. Um, Trump is an untraditional candidate. He is a complete political outsider. He has not bent to Washington's will. I don't think I think the initial reaction to the pandemic, the 15 and maybe even the 30 days to stop the spread,
Mm-hmm.
was legitimately people working as a team and seeing A, what went on in China, and then B, the horrific things we were seeing in Italy. And at that point, our epidemiologists and people like Dr. Berg couldn't even get accurate information out of Italy because they were so hard hit.
Mm.
They were getting as much information as they could, but they still couldn't really read it very well. And then, of course, by the time we announced 30 days, we saw what had started in New York. And it was literally on our shores. Once we saw that it wasn't really spreading that bad anywhere else, and LA didn't look like New York, and it seemed to be these places in, the upper Midwest or, the upper Northeast, I think people started to reassess, and that's when President Trump started getting vocal about reopening the economy. I certainly think Democrats would have preferred the economy stay closed for a really long time. As far as the entire deep state sort of thing, I talked to Matt Whitaker,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a vision of it at the Department of Justice that I think I can kind of live with without buying stock in tinfoil. Um, so he basically said, you have people that burrowed in, they were political appointees, and now they're in career positions. So they come from a different political perspective than the president, and it's not all of them, but it's some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a lot of bureaucratic foot dragging and other things to impede his agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of get that. What I will say is where I see things that I don't like, and I start digging into funding, and I start digging into donors, and I always end up in the same place, and it really ticks me off,
Mm-hmm.
um, is with the Democrat Socialists of America and groups around climate change. There's one called 350.org. The head of it is a guy named Bill McKibben. He literally has written books about how we need to go back to being an agrarian society to save Mother Earth. He's
And
insane,
what
and he's a
position does
really
he hold? I mean, what power does he have, this guy, Bill
he
McKibben?
was directly plugged in with the Bernie Sanders campaign. He and Bernie
Okay.
Sanders had appeared together on climate change. Additionally, he when you start looking into climate funding, and I tried to do this, and I don't have the personnel resources, if you will, to really dig back in some. Do you remember the Sunrise Organization? I think it was the ones that protested in Nancy Pelosi's office, and AOC showed up at their protest in 2018.
I didn't know the name, but I remember there was hullabaloo over there. That's who Sunrise. What were they called?
I believe it's Sunrise Organization.
Okay.
Um,
And who
I
are they?
started. Well, I started digging into them.
Uh huh.
They were mentored by people from the Sierra Club, by 350.org, and this nut Bill McKibben, along with other environmental organizations. And what you end up seeing is a spider web of NGOs. And there's a lot of little ones, and they all belong to these organizations that facilitate communication across them, right? And then when they want to have something like a climate protest, the member organizations send out a notice to all their member organizations, and you get all these smaller groups flooding the street, and you can't tell A, who's in charge, and B, where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the other activist organizations on the left, they're very much the same. And
Mm-hmm.
most of their funding, I know we love to hate on George Soros, and he does a lot, but it actually comes through something shadowier than that, in my humble opinion, and that's the Tides Foundation.
The Who Foundation?
The Tides Foundation. It was
Tides?
established. Yep, it's named after a bookstore in San Francisco. They're what's called a
Tides?
Yep, they're what's called a bundler.
Okay.
So all the money comes into them, and they distribute it through grants to all of these NGOs across all of the political ideas, right? On the left, most of them far left. And then they created sister agencies. One of them is called Tides Advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
We need something like this on the right, but we'll never get it because nobody's smart enough to invest in it. Um, it's actually a group of PR people, lawyers, everybody you would need to set up a not-for-profit,
Mm-hmm.
from logo design to social media strategy. And they support all these small not-for-profits
Mm-hmm.
with those kinds of services. So if you're thinking about somebody like Sunset or Sunrise, I can't remember their name. It has something to do with the sun. They don't need to hire an accountant. They don't need to hire a lawyer. They don't need to hire marketing people. They just become a patron of Tides Advocacy. And Tides Advocacy is fully funded by the Tides Foundation.
Okay, I want to investigate that more, and I don't know if you've written any pieces on this, but you wrote a piece that just came up today on PJ Media, and you're calling it a plea to protesters after 7 days of chaos. Don't allow outside agitators to destroy your communities. I'm reading reports, and I've seen a lot of video on social media that there are individuals placing pallets, and large pallets at that, of bricks and rocks strategically around cities all across the country. How does that happen? Is this coming back to what you're talking about, these outside organizations, these NGOs? Because the logistical organization required to get massive pallets, first of all, those are expensive. You go to Home Depot and buy these big bricks in massive pallets. That's not cheap. Then you got to put them on some kind of distribution systems, on trucks and vans, and get them all across the United States. Who is doing this, and is this coming back to what you're talking about here?
Well, I saw some stuff from Andy No, who is far more expert than I am, about funding links between Democratic Socialists of America, so that would be the Squad, and Antifa.
Mm-hmm.
And also that they're basically their political patrons. And if you look, they've raised an incredible amount of money for bail to get these people out of jail.
A lot of our Hollywood stars are supporting these people as well.
Well, because they're just dumb.
Yeah, they are.
Literally, they're stupid.
But they carry a tremendous amount of gravity in social media, and people like what they do.
Oh, I know, but all I'm saying is they're virtue signaling.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing because they don't care to investigate and find out. Because where Antifa would prefer to loot is in Beverly Hills.
They did.
I mean, you saw that, but I mean, no, like, crawl over the wall to your mansion.
Oh, you mean
take
in the
all
homes,
your stuff.
The homes.
Yeah.
Like in Buckhead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. They are anarcho-communists. They don't want the state. They want a complete free-for-all where people just get what they want, take what they need, and we're all going to cooperate. You can see how cooperative they are.
Mm.
If you take a look at the organization, and there's a video in the article that I did from Seattle, and somebody said, wow, Seattle PD doesn't screw around, right? I watched the video, and if you watch the video, in the lower left-hand corner, there's about a dozen people with black umbrellas. I've been seeing videos from, because I sit up late at night and I watch all the videos being streamed from the protests. I go over to Twitch, I go over to Periscope, and I'm looking for things because I'm curious. This black umbrella thing with goggles, real common. Real common.
So what is that? Just a tail sign that they are part of an organization?
I think it's a tell sign that they're part of an organization. I think they bring the umbrellas to keep the tear gas and other things away from them as much as possible with their goggles and whatever else. But if you watch that, all the normal people run away when the flashbang starts.
Yeah.
And when things start happening, These guys congregate in the left-hand corner. Their umbrellas go down. They drop them. They run right in front of the police officers, start picking up the canisters and throwing them back at the police. Those kids are trained as militants. That is not your average protester. They are dressed and ready to go pick up a flaming can of tear gas and throw it back at the police. That is happening somewhere.
We have these instigators. We're seeing looting of small businesses all across the country. This is not localized. You know, in 1992, I was there. We had the Rodney King riots, and you know, they
Sacramento.
basically and we had a few copycat riots around the country, smaller, Oakland as well. But it was very localized, especially in South Central LA. They basically burned it down. This is the next generation. And as dumb as I think they are, they've obviously learned their lesson from 1992 that they don't want to burn their own city down, even though they started. Is this a movement that starts to die out? We saw President Trump come out very, very strong. You know, he walked over to St. John's Church. He told the governors that if they don't implement the National Guard, he's going to use the military. The left don't like that. They're arguing. They're saying that, you know, it's essentially totalitarianism and this and that. They seem to be on every opposite side of law and order, by the way. And I think that's definitely, I want to get your opinion on how that you think that's going to impact the election in 5 months. But is this a phenomenon that you think is going to just last a few more days? Does it usually peters out? Or do we have something else that is now beginning here?
You have something else that has been in the works since President Trump was elected.
Mm-hmm.
And probably since before that, because think of all the things we wouldn't know if Hillary Clinton was elected. The Obama administration basically weaponized its intelligence and law enforcement agency to spy on Americans, and Carter Page was not the only one. We had them spying on journalists. We had them spying on the AP. We had them spying on Jim Rosen's parents, right?
Former
we had them spying on Congress.
Yeah.
But we had them spying on Congress, people who opposed the Iran deal. Think of all the things we just wouldn't know if Hillary Clinton had been elected. We'd be walking around dumb and happy, right? Well, not happy that she was elected, but we wouldn't have been any unhappier than we were under Obama. Supposedly.
It's arguable.
So that's one thing. The second thing is the leaders of these Black Bloc and Antifa organizations are not dumb. They're not. They're generally college educated. They have studied mob mentality. They know how to create a riot.
It's Alinsky tactics, right?
It's Alinsky tactics. It's directing these kids who are angry to a pallet of bricks. It's whipping them up. It's taking it. They have tools. If you watch them, you'll see some of them carry tools. If they're in all black, they're professional glass breaking equipment. They break the glass and wait for other people to run in. They don't go in and steal stuff. They're literally creating these riots. They're not dumb.
I've been reading that they're organized, that they've got scouts that are going out on skateboards and bicycles and looking for areas where the police aren't.
Walkie-talkies, not cell phones.
Yep, exactly. And so, I mean, this is very much organized. The question is, and you know, I'm unfortunately watching some local news. I don't generally like to watch local news because I find it inane. But again, you want to know what's going on in your local area. You want to find out if you're in danger, right? So I'm watching this stuff, and it's every sentence is prefaced by the anchors in the studio, by the reporters on the streets, that these aren't the peaceful protesters. These aren't the peaceful protesters. You know, you got to separate the two. And I agree with that. But the problem is that, do you think Americans can make that distinction right now and understand? Listen, I find what happened in Minnesota abhorrent. We all do. I think both the left and the right are in 99.999% agreement that you can't have in the United States of America this murder of a suspect for zero reason, zero. So we all get that. But the media are you talked about, this moral preening, that we're seeing coming from the mainstream media. It's almost as if they're trying to separate the idea of the I guess the looters, the anarchists, the Antifa types that are coming out there, and trying to put it in its own separate category, where I think that there's a lot of people, again, non-tinfoil hat people, that are raising the question, as we are right now, and saying, was that fuse lit in Minnesota just the fuse that the left were waiting for, and they are using these peaceful protesters as essentially cannon fodder?
They have co-opted a legitimate movement in trying to address, obviously policing needs reform in Minneapolis. Their chief came out today and said they're being scapegoated. Dude, that officer had 18 complaints against him. He shouldn't have even been on the force.
Yeah, Klobuchar didn't prosecute him.
Exactly. But what I'm saying
She's done, by the way. She's done. The idea of vice president now is done.
Oh my gosh. And Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren are just duking it out.
Yeah.
It's getting nasty.
And Abrams.
But
yeah,
but after Keisha Lance Bottoms, the Atlanta mayor, spoke up, everybody kind of forgot about Stacey Abrams.
She won't let them forget about it. She's everywhere. Her ego's as big as that gap between her two front teeth. Come on.
I'm like, you're stealing my line. I'm like, if you want to run for office, fix your teeth. You can't have a space that you can drive a truck through.
What is that?
Well, she was like in huge tax debt before she ran for office. So come on, maybe her books weren't that popular. Maybe she's not that good.
She was and is no longer. How has she earned any money over the past 3 years?
She paid herself like a $240,000 a year salary from one of the not-for-profits she started, and then she moved out of a leadership position. She still sits on the board, but yes, she got a salary from one of her not-for-profits for a while.
I'm in the wrong business.
Oh, she's a grifter from way back.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
so are you not thinking, because we know that Joe Biden, I had a former Biden senior advisor on a few weeks ago, and I tried to point him down on this. I'm like, why is Biden so focused on identity politics as the reason to select a VP? Should you go for meritocracy? Do you think Biden is backing off of Abrams? I called in June, just almost a year ago, June of 2019, it was going to be Biden and Harris. But I think Abrams...
That's honestly mine.
You think so? But now I'm looking at Gretchen Whitmer. Michigan, electorally speaking, is a heck of a lot more important than California.
Do you really think Whitmer, after the last couple of months, is going to win Michigan?
No, I think she's a disaster.
She's a disaster.
But the left like her.
Yeah, I know, and they put really nice profiles about her in Politico and stuff like that. Right. But here's... Obama didn't endorse Biden without saying, I weigh in here, and if Obama gets to pick, it's going to be Harris.
For what reason? What does she bring? I got my thoughts on this. What do you think she brings to the ticket? Because California...
What does Harris bring to the ticket?
Yeah, California is not an electoral get for them. They have already got it.
I know what they think she brings to the ticket, but point is, she's part of Team Obama. Being part of Team Obama is just like being part of Foggy Bottom, right?
Mm.
She is.
How is she Team Obama? She came up through Willie Brown in Sacramento.
Yeah, but he ended up campaigning for her.
Literally, by the way.
Yeah, I know, right? There's a guy out in Southern California with you. You might know him, Dave Goss.
Dave Goss?
Yeah.
Yeah. He had Trump singles. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah, no, David, I met at CPAC.
Yeah.
He got me hooked on the hashtag Willie Brown's mistress.
Yeah.
That's
no, Dave's a great guy. He comes to my cigar group occasionally. He's a good friend. Yeah,
no, Dave cracked me up. Like every time he was in a group I was out with at CPAC, I laughed hard enough to cry. Like he is one funny dude.
He's
But
he's
I
very
said something.
politically involved in California 25 with
Mhm.
Mike Garcia.
You know, I said something to him one day about Kamala Harris. He goes, "You mean Willie Brown's mistress?"
Yeah.
And then he
I
just kept hashtagging Willie Brown's mistress.
I love Mike. He's a good guy.
Yeah. So anyway, um, I don't think she brings a lot to the table. I actually think she has a lot of negatives. The African American community does not like her, and nobody looking at Joe Biden thinks he is going to run the country. I
Yes.
think Kamala Harris actually hurts him, not because people will go out and vote for Trump, but they'll stay home.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. From a political strategist, and you got to separate yourself from your politics. I don't see anything on the left right now very compelling. And here's the thing, and I want your opinion on this because I think this is going to be the discussion that a lot of people in the mainstream media are going to wake up to in the next couple of months. We have seen the left essentially push back against law and order in 1968, amongst a year of riots and assassinations. America chose the law and order president, Nixon. Okay. In Los Angeles in 1992, in Los Angeles, of all cities in the country, even in the 90s, Los Angeles wasn't very conservative. It was very liberal. They chose a Republican mayor, Dick Riordan, after the riots. So outside of the, do you think the media are going to start hand-wringing a little bit and starting to worry a little bit that they've really put themselves in the corner to be defending the activists and the Antifas of the world, while you've got Trump that's coming out and basically saying, look, you know, I'll be your security blanket here. The other side, this is what they want. They want to tear everything out.
I think it will increase Trump's popularity with working class people, whether they're in a city or in a rural area. I think that's who's going to appreciate the law and order. I think um, conventional wisdom would tell you security moms should. They should appreciate that. They should be concerned about law and order. My concern is that the indoctrination has gone deep since 1972.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't live with a whole lot of liberal white guilt because I've never done anything to anybody in my life.
Right.
Okay. Um, I'm not going to buy into that I'm somehow responsible for things that I've never done. However, some of my peers will. I find it ridiculous.
Some of
Here,
your conservative peers?
no, some other suburban moms that I
Oh,
know
okay. Okay.
will buy into that. Will buy into that guilt by association thing. I've actually seen people on Facebook apologizing for being upset when Colin Kaepernick knelt because if they'd only understood. Excuse me?
Yeah, the virtual signaling in the past few days that we've seen, it's been pretty disgusting. It's quite lame, and
But
I'm disappointed with a lot of people.
I think they think that the alligator will eat them last or the looting will stop if they just say I'm sorry loud enough. That's
Yeah.
not what's going on. They want you to kneel, and never apologize.
Did you see the video of those people, actually the white people at one of the locations of rioting? I don't know if it was in LA or somewhere else, where they actually got on their knees in front of black people and asked for their forgiveness,
Forgiveness for what?
being white.
This is like the protesters, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want change. We need to fix the system. Okay, what would you like? Notice in that article I wrote today, I put 3 things in there that a large portion of conservatives and some activists on the left who want true police reform could probably agree to.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of public unions. It's not just going to increase the quality of your police force, it's going to increase the quality of your schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a whole host of other public services. Public unions, and I'm saying this from my industrial and labor relations background, are an abomination because the only people those unions can leverage are the taxpayer. The government is the people because they have the consent of the governed. People who are providing me a service shouldn't be able to leverage me. That's it. You can't keep
Yeah.
it's a completely ugly system.
Well, it's the
So
unions that have essentially turned the blue states, primarily New York, Illinois, and California, into pension hellholes. And now they're all asking for bailouts from the U.S. taxpayer.
no,
Is that a winning strategy for the left this year?
um, I can tell you as somebody who doesn't live in a deep blue state, when I hear Gavin Newsom or I hear Governor Cuomo say, you know, President Trump, you've got to help us supercharge LA's economy or the Bay Area's economy or New York City's economy. When I'm sitting in here in Georgia, I'm
Hmm.
worried about supercharging Georgia's economy.
Right.
I have a compact with my state government. I've agreed to pay a certain amount of taxes. They've agreed to give me a certain amount of services. I've done that with the federal government. Now, my state, unlike the governments in some of these blue states, has not failed spectacularly on keeping law-abiding citizens and their property safe over the last couple of days. We've done much better after the initial riots than most other cities. And
Mm.
again, that's because Governor Kemp, a Republican, and Mayor Bottoms, a Democrat, cooperated and said,
So
we're not going to
coming
have that here.
Yeah. So coming back to, we're 5 months away, and unless we have major earthquakes or huge hurricanes or the sweet meteor of death that hits us, which after the first
Don't
5 months of
tease
this
me.
year, no,
Don't
but I mean
tease
this
me.
year, every single what happened to the murder hornets, right? I mean, every single month there's this new thing. So, but I'm assuming, let's say that we don't have any massive disasters over the next few months, that the media is now going to pivot back to the election. We're going to be focused on 2020 election. Do you think that this has helped or hurt? You talk about Georgia, talk about it from a national perspective, or talk about it from battleground states, especially in the upper Midwest. Is this going to help or hurt the left this year?
Florida's not going to look forward to paying blue states a bailout. Tennessee's not going to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about Illinois, California, New York that have worked themselves into a hole they're never going to be able to dig out of unless they make some significant changes. And I'd ask Gavin Newsom to Google the term austerity and
Mm-hmm.
stop paying cash you don't have to illegal immigrants. That would be a good start.
Yeah.
I mean, when we see things like that sitting in Georgia or sitting in a battleground state like Florida or, one of the others, and you're going, you want me to do what? Because we just took on trillions of dollars. What does it end up actually being? 6.5 trillion, I think,
So far,
through
but
the
there's
CARES
another
Act.
three. There's another three tranche in there somewhere.
Yeah, through the CARES Act. We
Mm-hmm.
just agreed to do that and put that burden on ourselves and our children and probably our grandchildren.
Well, you saw Nancy Pelosi's latest one, the Hearts, whatever it was called. They always
Yeah,
they
that's
always
not going to
name these
happen.
things the complete opposite. It's not going to happen. We've obviously got Mitch McConnell that said that there's no way in hell that's going to ever land on the desk in any senator. But at the same time, you could see what their priorities were. Right? It was all leftist gimmies.
Oh,
And included in those leftist gimmies were millions, tens of millions of dollars for illegal aliens, illegal immigrants. And I've got no issue with anybody immigrating to the United States. I'm a naturalized citizen myself. Our viewers know this. I immigrated in 77, became naturalized in 89. It took me 12 years. I went through the long line. Okay? I've got no issue, but do it the right way. So
right.
is America looking to support the illegal immigrants, where at the same time they got this measly $1,200 check, which doesn't cover hardly anything for most people today. And they're seeing that, well, we've got to focus on the other people because it's politically expedient. They're going to become Democrat voters eventually. We have to.
I mean, of course. I mean, that strategy has been out there explicitly. Explicitly, a
Mm-hmm.
pathway to citizenship for the vast majority of illegal citizens in this country would mean a permanent Democrat majority, which is weird. Weird, I tell you, because the immigrants that I know, recent immigrants, not even first generation, but just moved here and did it correctly. I've got somebody from, I believe, Mexico that fixes our cars. He owns a garage. He's the best mechanic I've ever met in my life. And a family next door to us that owns a grocery store and restaurant. And when I think about them, they're small business owners. They live their lives very conservatively. They go to church. Why would they vote for Democrats based on the way they live? We've like never made the case to that community that we share their values. Somehow the Democrats robbed us of the moral high ground, and how they were ever able to accomplish that with their intersectional garbage, I will never understand.
You know, I find the times that we live in right now so stressful. And at the same time, there's a side of this, and I want to get your opinion because you write, you're in the media, PJ Media, you do radio and the like. So I want your perspective on this. Every single day, there is a new breaking news story that years ago would have taken a week to process through the cycle, and now it literally takes hours, and some days you have 2 or 3 of these. Have we gotten to the point where there's so much of this that a lot of people have either tuned out, or B, that it is just not having the impact that many of the politicos expected it would have? We impeached the president of the United States, at least the House did, 4 months ago. We don't talk about that anymore, as if it was just a kind of a fleeting, I mean, there's
Democrats
so many things.
don't want to talk about it.
Are we just numb to this at this point?
To some degree, but a lot of it's driven by what the Democrats and their allies want to talk about. I mean, there's a particular lady at the New York Times that I call Bat Signal. Okay. Remember the bat signal from Batman where Alfred would come out and like put it and Batman would come in?
Yeah.
I call Maggie Haberman the bat signal.
Haberman. I was thinking Halperin. It was Haberman. Good.
Yep.
Yep.
If you want to know what the narrative is going to be coming out of the Democratic establishment for the next 24 hours, look at Maggie's timeline about either 4:30 in the afternoon or 7 o'clock the next morning. You're going to see it, and you're going to see it repeated through the Washington Post, through CNN, through NBC, through ABC, through CBS, through all of them. It's predictable like clockwork.
A lot of folks know who she is from Twitter, but outside of that, majority of Americans aren't on Twitter. What is Maggie Haberman's politics? What does she believe?
She was mentioned in Cheryl Atkinson's book through, I believe, was it Cheryl Atkinson? It was through Podesta's leaked emails that we found out that Democrat strategists like Podesta knew Maggie at Politico, knew they could plan a story, knew they could plan a narrative, and she'd run with it.
So she's a spokesperson for the DNC, the Democrat Party.
Absolutely. And she's so broken, she essentially tweeted last night that it was okay for a white store manager to get the crap beat out of him.
She said that.
She didn't exactly say that, but there was somebody on Twitter who was going through and finding all the videos of regular citizens or business owners being assaulted or hurt, right? And saying, you want more of this? Vote blue. I mean, he was being sarcastic, but if you vote for Democrats, this is what you're supporting, was basically what the guy was saying. And President Trump must have happened across the thread on somebody he takes a look at or whatever, and he retweeted it. And he said, this is why we can't let them win. And then Maggie Haberman quote tweets the president and says, reports say that this is a white store manager that the president just retweeted about. I went nuts. I was already tired. It was 11 p.m. and I couldn't believe some of the stuff I was seeing. I just told her she was broken and she needed to log off Twitter. Like literally at this point, Trump has ruined you so bad you're brain damaged. Who would tweet that?
Unfortunately, leftist Twitter all feels like that right now. I mean, it really is cancerous and it is ugly. And it isn't just journalists and opinion makers, but it's also politicians. You had an article that came out earlier. You were talking about AOC. You said, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez the leader of this pack now?
She is.
Talk a little bit about that and what we're looking at right now as the Democrat Party 2020.
There was a gentleman who developed technology, telecommunications, and media policy for Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. He is one of the few people that went from Obama's camp to Hillary Clinton's State Department. That was mostly Clintonites. Obama kept most of his own people.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Alec Ross. He likes to talk a lot about revolutions. He particularly likes leaderless revolutions. So he was a big fan of Occupy and other things. He started a program called, what was it, Statecraft 2020 or something like this. And basically, out of that came something called Civil Society 2.0. He created a program called Tech Camps and basically taught people in the Middle East and in Ukraine how to have a revolution. And those revolutions and tech camps were put in places where a revolution would be politically beneficial to the United States of America. So the one thing he found with the Arab Spring was the lack of a leader that the revolutionaries could eventually coalesce around. So you have all this chaos going on, right? A leader needs to emerge. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is a marketing campaign, right? She's dumb as a box of rocks, but she's good at it. You know, she is being positioned as the leader. Her cohorts in the squad are being being positioned as her team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as this thing is evolving, she is going to replace Bernie Sanders with the Bernie boys. I mean, Zach Exley, who was, I think he was Bernie's campaign manager in 2016. I mean, he's a freaking communist. He put together the DSA. He knows exactly what he's doing. There's some really smart people, scary people, but smart people behind that organization. And yes, I spend way too much time on the internet looking at this stuff. I like to find connections and I like to find common threads. And when I find them, I pull on them.
Yeah, yeah. So this Alex Ross, again, you mentioned he was a former advisor to Hillary Clinton. You're seeing these types of individuals that are behind the scenes. They're kind of pulling the strings as marionettes. They're using incidents like George Floyd, and the again, something that is, we're undivided as a country over. It was horrific what we saw. We will not accept that. But AOC, what you're talking about, is coming in. She's wading into the debate and essentially suggesting that, and I think you wrote here, by defining the terms on which the crime sprees will end, she is implying that she may have some influence. The influence being, you must accept our terms of our leftist demands.
Yep.
And you take a look at these leftist demands, and it comes out of the handbook of the DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, and the hard left.
So does Nancy Pelosi's entire HEROES Act.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Democrat Party has been co-opted. And if you think that Joe Biden isn't going to be dragged left by, if Joe Biden is elected, it's Barack Obama's third term. Barack Obama already told us when he did his endorsement, when he did his endorsement, that he can guarantee us that Joe Biden will have the appropriate experts around him to restore our nation to its former greatness.
Yeah.
He basically told everyone, Joe Biden will not be running the country. It's going to be my team again.
He's a figurehead. It will be the Obama administration.
It's going to be the Obama team. You're going to see Susan Powers or Susan Rice back. You're going to see Samantha Powers or people who worked for them. I don't think you'll see Loretta Lynch back. I don't think you'll see Holder back. You're going to have somebody new as AG. If Kamala Harris doesn't get the VP slot, he'll make her AG. If we don't keep the Senate.
I take a look at what's going on in Minnesota right now, and you got Keith Ellison, who's the AG there, and basically they've saddled this whole thing on top of him for him to go through. He's going to come back. He's going to figure out a way to get to first-degree murder, which it looks like he should anyway. I mean, what was it? 8 minutes he had his knee on there. I mean, the guy, that's fully intent. But it's the guy is a devout supporter of Antifa. You've seen the pictures online. He's got pictures of the Antifa handbook.
As his daughter.
As his daughter
Daughter's
does.
a member.
And speaking of daughters, did you see De Blasio's daughter? She got arrested.
Oh, he's very proud of her.
He's very proud of her. This girl looks like, first of all, she's got the crazy eyes like AOC does, right? What is that look? What is that crazy socialist look that these young kids have? It's really scary. It's like Autonobots.
Oh, it is. It's very scary. I personally think the scariest one in the squad and their associates that are DSA.
Ilhan and her daughter was promulgating tweets, putting them out there, telling people where to go, bring the sticks, bring all these different things. I mean, they're instigating violence.
Right, but much like Linda Sarsour, Ilhan Omar doesn't believe any of this.
What do you mean by that?
They are Islamists. Islamists use leftists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as useful tools. Bridget Gabriel's been telling us that for years. They do not believe any of this. Ilhan Omar lives a decadent life only because they allow her to, because she's entered the halls of power. That's it. Linda Sarsour runs that woman.
Well, Linda Sarsour, who we know basically cozies up with Hamas and Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations around the country.
They're Islamists.
The Islamists. They're against Israel. Boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. Right?
No Sharia law.
And so when we take a look, and again, let's go back to Minnesota. Ilhan Omar's district, I think it's the 5th district. It wasn't it wasn't exactly where this all took place, but it was adjacent. We take a look at Rashid Tlaib in Michigan. Again, Rashid Tlaib in Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan. There's Sharia pockets in Michigan. They have their own police councils there. Right?
At this point, if Ilhan Omar is not the poster child where we need to stop taking refugees from the Middle East and Islamic countries until they can be fully vetted. And when we do, we don't bring them in a group. That was Europe's mistake.
Yeah.
We had people coming from the Middle East and India and other places for decades. They came through the normal immigration system. They got jobs. They settled. They got educated. They didn't live in enclaves. If we're going to bring 100 refugee families, they need to go to 100 different cities.
How do you do that when there's this freedom of mobility in this country? You can't lock people down into certain
What I'm
cities,
saying is you don't lock them down, but you seed them with the appropriate supports, with refugee support systems, which we have, right? Taking refugees is a good thing. Those are people that are being persecuted. I'm probably not going to get too up in the air about that. I would hope that we would agree to take some of the people.
Yeah, if they're legitimate.
Well, the democracy protesters from Hong Kong. I would give some of them visas and what's happening to them is heartbreaking. I would actually exchange a democracy protester in Hong Kong for one of these Antifa folks, 1 for 1. You want to live in an anarcho-communist? This is my plan. If you catch them with a black umbrella and purple goggles, just put them on a plane and bring me back a Hong Kong protester.
Yeah.
I have more in common with the protesters on the street in Hong Kong in terms of my values around liberty and freedom than I do with those idiots wearing black. How is it that I was raised in the same country as those idiots in black and we share almost no values? That's really scary.
So we're looking here at something which, and we're taking a look at obviously in the light of everything that's been taking place over the past few days here. But Stacey, when we take a look at an AOC, you call her a Che Guevara type, and she very much is so. I mean, I'm sure she donned Che Guevara's poster in her college dorm at BU. Again, coming back to, and I guess this is one of my last questions here for you, because I appreciate you taking the time. When we take a look at November, again, we're just 5 months away now from this thing. It's here. It's on us. In a normal election cycle, we'd be getting polls updated every single day by the media, although none of them mean anything. National polls don't mean a thing. So with that being said, is America taking a look, your opinion on this? They're taking a look at the burning of our cities, the 20-somethings, and that's the one thing that I'm seeing demographically that unites all of these people. They're young. They're teenagers and 20-somethings that are going out and tearing down our cities all across the country. Do you think that's going to motivate the people across the country in November who are silent? They're watching this on their screens right now. They're oiling their guns just in case to go out. And even if they don't like this president, they may be even Democrats, left of center people that are taking a look at the left hard wing of their party being overtaken and are going to say, yeah, I may not like the guy's tweets. I may not like what he says. He may be a bit of a bully, but I'm going to feel safer.
I don't know if that would motivate people to actually vote for the president. What I think it would cause is lower voter turnout.
Okay.
They would be kind of where I was in 2016, like seriously, out of 340 million, this is the best you can come up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I were a true center.
Were you for Trump or Cruz, or where were you in the campaign?
I didn't participate in the top line. I voted Republican the rest of the way down. I grew up in upstate New York. I've known who Donald Trump was since I could talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's been a fixture in New York. I thought he just wanted to be president, and he was saying things that conservatives wanted to hear, a certain subset of conservatives, and that he would go to Washington and work with Nancy Pelosi. I did not trust that he was being authentic.
I think a lot of people shared that concern. I voted for him.
Flaming liberal his entire life.
Cross my fingers, but he wasn't her.
Yep. I mean, at that point.
Where are you voting top line this year?
I would crawl over broken glass on fire to vote for Donald J. Trump this time.
What is that? What are the biggest motivators for you?
Number one, China.
Okay.
I worked in corporate America for 15 years. I was an accidental globalist.
Mm-hmm.
When you have to drive through the town where the manufacturing facility that you closed was, it teaches you a thing or two.
Right.
Yeah. So China needs to be confronted. We need to bring medications home. We need to bring medical equipment home. We need to bring a lot of things home. National security, etc., or at least with our allies. He's trying on immigration. He's gotten more done than anybody else could without Congress. So I gotta give him like points for effort there.
Yeah.
He's got, and I used to hate the whole tariff thing, but I realize how he uses them now. He uses them as a political tool.
That, I think, up until this whole latest drama with COVID and everything else that we're dealing with, I think we were on the right track. But there's a lot of very intellectual people that I'm talking to right now that know a lot more than me about trade, and they're saying that, yeah, we may be going into a new Cold War with these guys right now. That's
okay.
Yeah. It may be okay. It may be okay. I think, up until this point, it's like the economy. Up until this point, everything Trump was doing, much to the chagrin of the left, was working. And I think that's why a lot of people are not too upset about the fact that we're delaying reopening these cities right now with these riots.
Well, here's the other thing, though. China has been in a Cold War with us since the Clinton administration.
Yeah.
So it's about time we take our position there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stacey, I think this is one of those discussions we got to have again. And tell everybody where they could find you, PJ Media, all of your sites, Twitter. You've got an incredible Twitter feed. You've got a great following. You are an influencer, and so everybody needs to check out Scott's Fire at Scott's Fire on Twitter. But tell everybody else where they can find what you're doing.
Yep. Like you said, I'm at Scott's Fire on Twitter. I'm an influencer without a blue check.
Yeah.
So none of the blue checks answer me.
You're on the wrong side.
I know. I'm also on Facebook. My Facebook page where I post everything I write is at Liberty Gypsy, because that's what Michael Loftus calls me on our podcast.
Liberty Gypsy, yeah. Michael's a great guy. Michael's a great guy.
I've moved around the country a lot, and I've lived in a lot of different places, and then I traveled a ton for work. So he'd say, well, I went here, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been there. I love so-and-so and so-and-so. He's like, where have you not been? Do you live in a wagon and tell fortunes? So then I became
and I could see Michael saying it that way.
Yeah.
He's great. Yeah, I'm just in our discussion here, you've mentioned New York, upstate New York, Sacramento, Atlanta. I'm probably forgetting a couple.
Salt Lake City, Savannah.
Yeah. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
So Facebook and obviously Twitter, and then PJ Media. You write a lot. I mean, just in the past 2 days, you've had a couple of articles.
I generally try to put out 2 to 3 a day. So the last couple days have actually been slow.
Okay. Well, buck it up. Come on.
I've been staying up way too late, glued to the footage of these riots, trying to figure out what's going on.
It is compelling, man. It is. I mean, if there's one thing about TV, and that is live TV, is this is going back to George Carlin. It's basically just, I just want to see it burn. You know, how bad is it going to get? And there's something sick within us. I think it's just human beings, you know, that's almost like, you know, none of us want to see devastation. We don't want to see crime. We don't want to see riots. We don't want to see, especially people getting hurt. But there's something fascinating about the complete breakdown of something that we've just taken for granted our whole lives to watch. I guess you probably only feel that way if you're kind of out in the suburbs like I am. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Well, but it's not that it can't touch you either. I mean, they've been going out to the burbs.
I know they have.
That's where the organizers of this would rather be.
Yeah, but this is where the Second Amendment supporters live.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it at that.
Got a lot of oath keepers and sheepdogs in my neck of the woods, so.
Oh, well, I'm in a relatively red part of a very, very blue state. So you come into my neighborhood, and it's not going to end well for these guys. So
I don't even know that too many people near me necessarily are political, but they're rednecks.
Rednecks. Okay.
Rednecks. That just means they work hard and they would defend their family and they would defend their stuff. Yeah. I don't know how necessarily how they vote, but
that's all it is. It's just don't, you know, it's just don't tread on me. It's Gadsden flag stuff. So Stacey Lennox, greatly appreciate you taking the time. And we'll have you back on again down the road. Everybody go check out PJ Media. She writes very, very well. And her social media as well. We've got the links here below. And we'll have to have you back on again. Thanks, Stacey. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Cheers. And thanks to you for watching and following us at Whiskey Politics. We've got some great episodes planned. Again, we will have Pete Hegseth back on again in the next few weeks. You know, I try not to tease upcoming guests because we've had several over the past couple of months that have had to reschedule, and they're going to be coming back on. We've got some big names that are in the hopper right now that we're trying to decide on scheduling. So stick around, and if you enjoy the show, please support us at paypal.me/mywhiskeypolitics. It's right here. PayPal.me/mywhiskeypolitics. That way we can keep the lights on here in the studio. And don't forget to smash the like button and do all the things, subscribe, and give us some comments and whatever it may be. Follow us at ricochet.com, YouTube, Apple Podcast, and the like. We'll be back again real soon here at Whiskey Politics. Again, very special thanks to Stacey Lennox. Cheers.